You think 67 means I'm done? I told my reflection in the dark kitchen window. No, son, it means I've outlived every cheap trick you're about to try, and I've learned where to put the knife without leaving a mark. The porch light hummed like a bad neon sign, painting the driveway that nicotine orange you only see in old diners. The casserole dishes from kind neighbors were stacked like trophies of pity on my counter. Kimberly's garden, her pride, was going winter brown. Hydrangeas gone parchment. The stone rabbit she loved leaning a little, like even it knew. When the heater kicked on, the vent sang that tired, tinny note. Little anchors for the ear, little ghosts. That's how grief moves and quietly, like dust in a beam of morning light. You don't notice until it touches everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. We buried Kimberly on a Monday. A week later, America was setting out plastic skeletons and candy bowls. Halloween, I sat at our oak table, the one with the dent from the Thanksgiving Brian slammed his fist years back when the Cowboys lost in overtime. I ran my thumb over that dent and thought, even old would remembers. The door opened without a knock. Brian never knocked. Dad, he said, voice bright like a radio ad. He had on that startup casual, quarter-zip, white soles, a watch that wanted attention. Amber trailed him, perfume loud enough to argue with the cinnamon candle by the sink. Coffee? I asked. No time, Amber said, already checking her phone. Brian set a bundle of glossy papers on the table. Let's be adults. He pushed the stack toward me with 2 fingers. I found a buyer. Cash. Clean. Market still decent if you move quick. We got an offer on our new place, and timing matters. I blinked at the word he'd chosen. Our. He said it like this house was his memory to sell, his childhood to leverage. Brian, I said, your mother's coffee can still under the sink. You can at least pretend to look for it before you start talking about timing. Amber sighed. This isn't about nostalgia. He flashed that management smile. Dad, listen, the house is an asset. You don't need this much space. It's not practical. He tapped the pages. I negotiated above appraisal. I got you a good number. You'll thank me when you're in a condo with an elevator. Outside, a kid laughed that high sugar hype squeal. My porch, which flapped the way it always did when the October wind slid down from the lake. I imagined the soft thud of Kimberly's gardening clogs by the door, the grit of soil she never managed to keep outside. I said nothing. Silence is a tool. The older you get, the sharper it gets. Brian mistook my quiet for agreement. We need you out by Friday. Friday. I repeated, tasting the word. It's not a prank, Amber said, irritation sharpening every syllable. We're in escrow, and the buyer wants a clean handover. I reached for the papers. The legalese glared up at me, black ink with the confidence of people who've never paid with their own blood. My wedding ring clicked once on the table, a small, precise sound. The kind you remember. Your mother loved this house. I said. She loved you, Brian said, and for a second there was a true thing in his voice. That's why I'm doing this. You need care. Structure. We're helping. Helping. He made it sound like a rescue. He'd always been good at repackaging selfishness as service. As a boy, he'd help by carrying Kimberly's grocery bag, the one with eggs, and drop it 2 steps in the counter so he could sprint back to his video games. Same grin, same distance. I stacked the papers, squared the corners, slid them back. I'll take a look. Great. Relief, slick and premature. Signed by tomorrow. I'll have the notary swing by. I walked him and Amber to the door. The wind pocketed under the eaves, whistled, let go, trick or treat. A tiny pirate yelled from the sidewalk, and I dropped 3 fun-sized Snickers into a plastic pumpkin. The pirate saluted like a Navy man. Brian leaned close. Don't make this hard, Dad. I smiled the way men smile right before they lift a weight you can't see. Wouldn't dream of it. They left. Their taillights bled red down the block, then turned out of my life like a decision already made. The house settled. The clock over the stove coughed up a minute. I stood with my hand on the back of Kimberly's chair and listened to the heater sing. Somewhere, out over the black water, a loon called, one long broken note that didn't ask for permission to be sad. The doorbell rang again. When I opened it, there was a man I didn't know, suit too warm for October, breath white in the porch light. He held a thick, sealed envelope with my name on it and said, "Mr. Douglas? I'm from a private attorney. Your wife asked me to deliver this today." The envelope felt heavier than paper should, not thick with pages, heavy like a stone you've carried too long. My name, Douglas, inked in a hand I knew, Kimberly's hand. I hadn't seen it in months, not since her scrawl on the last grocery list stuck to the fridge. Milk, flour, birdseed. She never forgot the birds. I closed the door, the house suddenly smaller. The stranger tipped his hat. Yes, an honest-to-God hat, and left without waiting for a word. Professionals like that don't linger. They're paid to deliver weight, not share it. I sat at the table, the contract papers still there, smug in their neat stack. The envelope lay across them like a verdict. My fingers shook as I slid a letter opener, an old brass thing Kimberly bought at an estate sale, under the flap. The cut made a crisp sigh. Inside, her voice returned. "Doug, if you're reading this, I'm gone, but I couldn't leave you empty-handed." Her words pulled me through time. I saw her at the kitchen counter, biting the tip of a pen, deciding whether to cross out love for with love. I saw her in the garden, dirt on her cheeks, smiling that sideways smile that said she knew more than she let on. She wrote about a second house, small, near the lake, the one we used to walk past on summer evenings. She'd bought it quiet years back, with money from her landscaping jobs. She'd hidden it from Brian, not from me. No, she knew I'd argue, tell her we should be transparent, but she was smarter than me about people, especially about Brian. Then the number, $100,000, nestled in a separate account, meant for me, not for the boy who'd grown into a man of deals and shortcuts. For me, the man who had carried her through cancer and carried her groceries when she was too proud to ask. I pressed the paper to my face, inhaled whatever trace of her lingered. Maybe it was nothing but ink and my own wishful thinking, but for a second it smelled like rosemary, the way her hands always did after pruning. I laughed once harsh. My son had just told me to vacate my life by Friday. My wife had just told me she'd been planning for this exact moment. One hand taking, one hand giving. That's the story of family, isn't it? The heater clanked on again, steady, like a drumbeat in the background. Kimberly's letter ended with a line that burned. "Don't let him take your dignity, Doug. Protect what matters. Protect what matters. Not revenge, not bitterness. Dignity." She'd known me too well. She'd known my weakness. The way I'd let Brian's temper, his arrogance, bend me over the years. The way I'd excuse him with a father's blind spot. But she'd also known my strength. Patience sharpened over decades. I folded the letter, slid it back in the envelope, and tucked it inside my shirt pocket, close enough to feel her over my heart. I set the brass opener on the table. The papers Brian wanted signed looked different now, flimsy as a child's homework. His ink was nothing next to hers. The phone rang. Landline, the one Kimberly always insisted we keep. It startled me. Nobody used it anymore. My hand hovered, then picked up, "Dad." Brian's voice, slick with the confidence of a man who thinks he's steering the ship. "Hope you're looking over the paperwork. Not a big deal. Just need it squared away tonight. Buyers are eager." I closed my eyes. Her words echoed. "Protect what matters." "Yes," I said slowly. "I've looked at it." "Great. So you'll sign?" "I'll handle it," I said, and hung up before he could add anything else. The silence that followed was clean. Outside, a group of kids shouted, their candy buckets rattling like coins. I thought of Kimberly's secret savings. Thought of the house waiting like an undiscovered card in a gambler's sleeve. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid. I was planning. I stood, grabbed a cardboard box in the garage, and set it on the kitchen table. Tomorrow, when Brian came by, he'd see me packing. He'd think I was obeying. But the box wasn't for me. I'd just begun taping it shut, when headlights swept across the window, stopping in my driveway. A car door slammed, and then, unmistakably, Brian's footsteps on the porch, returning far too soon. Brian didn't knock. He never did. The door swung wide, the cold October air shouldering its way into my hallway. His sneakers squeaked on the hardwood as he strode in like he owned the place already. Amber wasn't with him this time. Maybe she'd grown tired of watching him play executioner. "You haven't signed," he said, voice clipped. No greeting, no soft landing. He saw the cardboard box on the table, the fresh strip of tape still warm from my palm. His eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering like a bad bulb. "I started packing." I said evenly, "Takes longer when you've lived in a place your whole life." He scanned the box. I'd filled it with kitchen towels, but right on top sat a stack of his old report cards. The ones Kimberly had kept even after he said they were useless paper. His name in fading ink. A C in math. A teacher's note about bright but distracted. Brian grabbed one, skimmed it, smirked. "Why do you still keep this crap?" "Your mother kept them," I said. Said every grade told a story. She should have burned the ones with CS. He tossed the paper back in, careless. Then he leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Listen, I don't have time for nostalgia. Did you read the contract?" "I read it. And it's not in my favor." He laughed, sharp, the way he did when bluffing poker with his buddies. "It's a market offer, Dad. You don't get favors at this age. You get options. A condo, assisted living, something manageable." I watched him, the way his shoulders squared, the way his jaw set. He wanted me to push back, so he could push harder. Kimberly always said Brian had the soul of a salesman and the patience of a mosquito. "You think this is mercy?" I said quietly. "It is mercy. You can't maintain this place. Pipes, roof, taxes, it's all bleeding you dry. I'm stepping in before it buries you." Burial. Wrong word. Kimberly had been buried only days ago, and he tossed it like loose change. I steadied my voice. "You're selling memories you didn't build. That's not mercy." For the first time, his grin slipped. A crack, just a thin one, but enough. He straightened, snatched the contract papers off the counter. "You're making this harder than it has to be." "No," I said, standing too. "I'm making it exact." We faced each other, silence swelling like a storm cloud. Then, from the street, a chorus of kids in costumes shouted for candy. Trick or treat. Their laughter carried through the open door, breaking the moment. Brian shoved the papers back down. "Tomorrow. Sign them, or I'll get the court involved. Don't forget, I've got rights here." "Rights." I repeated, tasting the word like ash. He turned on his heel, stormed out, and slammed the door so hard the walls rattled. I stood alone again, the box on the table like a silent witness. My chest rose and fell, not with fear, but with something harder, resolve. Kimberly's letter was still warm in my pocket. Her words burned like coals. Protect what matters. The house creaked as if it agreed. I went to the drawer, pulled out the phone book nobody touched anymore, and flipped until I found the name. Jeffrey L. Carter, attorney at law. Kimberly had trusted him once, years back, to draw up something small. Wills, minor contracts. Reliable, discreet. I dialed. The ring buzzed in my ear, louder than it should have been. A man's voice answered. Jeffrey Carter's office. "My name is Douglas." I said, steady, "I need to set up a trust. Tonight." The pause on the line stretched. Then, "We can talk first thing in the morning. My office, 8 sharp. Bring everything." "Everything," I echoed. I glanced at the tape box on the table, then at the letter over my heart. 8 sharp, he repeated. I hung up, the dial tone humming like a new engine. For the first time since Kimberly's death, I felt momentum. Not drifting. Driving. I looked around at the house, every picture frame and dented chair. Tomorrow, the game would shift. Brian thought he'd set the board. He hadn't realized I still had pieces hidden. I killed the lights, let the house sink into shadow. Then I whispered to the dark, the same way I used to whisper to Kimberly when Brian was small. It's time he learns. And in the silence that followed, I swore I heard her voice, calm, steady, certain. Yes. Teach him. The morning came gray, the kind of sky that looks like it's holding its breath. I shaved slow, careful, like a soldier before inspection. At 67, the mirror doesn't lie. But I wasn't looking for youth. I was looking for steel. Kimberly's letter was still tucked in my pocket, folded and worn at the corners already. My armor. Jeffrey's office was downtown, wedged between a pawn shop and a diner that smelled like burned bacon. Old building, brick facade, blinds drawn. Inside, the air smelled of leather and paper. He looked up from behind a walnut desk. Jeffrey Carter, late 50s, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. The kind of lawyer who didn't waste polish where grit did the job better. Douglas, he said, rising. I knew Kimberly. Good woman. She trusted me. I nodded. No need for eulogies. I'd had enough of those. She left me this. I slid the envelope across. He read fast, lips pressed tight. When he finished, he leaned back, hands steepled. Your son want to sell the house? He's already calling buyers. Treats it like it's to unload. Jeffrey exhaled through his nose, slow. Then the house is leverage. We'll put it in a trust. That removes his hands from the table entirely. He won't see it coming. I almost smiled. Kimberly had chosen the right man. And the funds, he asked. 100,000. I said. She left it clean. Enough to set up a move. Cover you. More than enough to fight back. His eyes sharpened. Douglas, this isn't just defense. This is offense. You understand? I do, I said. My voice didn't shake. He drafted the papers while I watched the second hand on his clock. Each tick felt like a nail hammered into a coffin. Not mine. Brian's claim, his arrogance, his certainty. Coffin sealed. When Jeffrey was done, he slid the folder across. Sign here. This transfers a house into a charitable trust. Under your oversight, your son won't have legal standing. The more he pushes, the deeper he drowns. I signed. The pen scratched steady, final. My father's ring clicked on the desk. Kimberly would have liked that sound. Jeffrey closed the folder, firm. Now you keep quiet. Let him think he's winning. The louder he laughs, the harder the fall. I stood, shaking his hand. His grip was rough, reassuring. I'll be ready. Walking back to my car, I passed the diner. The bell over the door jingled, and a group of construction workers spilled out, laughing, grease on their jackets. Normal life. I realized I wasn't part of their kind of normal anymore. I was in another current now, one that pulled harder, darker. At home, I set more boxes out. Packed dishes, old photos, odds and ends. I left them where Brian would see them. Stagecraft. A man my age learns patience, but he also learns presentation. You want an enemy to underestimate you? Give him the show he expects. That evening, as the sun bled out over the rooftops, Brian's car crunched up the drive again. He walked in, saw the boxes stacked like tombstones. Relief washed over his face, smug and unearned. Good, he said. You're finally being reasonable. I only nodded. He clapped me on the shoulder too hard, like a coach claiming credit. By Friday, Dad. We'll make it easy. He didn't see the papers hidden in my desk. He didn't see the trust already signed and sealed. He just saw what I wanted him to see, a tired old man boxed up and ready to surrender. And he left whistling. I stood in the dim kitchen, watching his taillights fade again, and whispered into the empty room. Not surrender. Set up. The house felt different once the trust papers were signed. Like the walls themselves had shifted allegiance. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the furnace. It no longer sounded like decay. It sounded like strategy. Kimberly's presence was everywhere, not as grief, but as momentum. I stacked another box in the living room, this one labeled in thick marker. Fragile. Inside, nothing but old phone books and yellowed newspapers. Stagecraft again. Let Brian think I was dismantling my life piece by piece. Let him picture me folding under the weight. That was the illusion he needed. By Wednesday, Amber showed up with him. She had her sunglasses pushed up on her head, though it was overcast. like she needed the world to know she had options. She sniffed around the boxes, lips pursed. Finally, she said, I told Brian this would be best. Clean start, new chapter. I watched her touch one of Kimberly's vases, a pale green ceramic thing Kimberly bought at a yard sale. Amber turned it in her hands like she was pricing it. You can take that if you want, I said flatly. She set it down, startled. Oh, no. We're just here to make sure the transition is smooth. Brian spread his arms like a man unveiling a prize. See, Dad? We're all on the same team. The gall of it nearly made me laugh. A team. Kimberly's words echoed in my chest. Protect what matters. I pulled a chair out and sat, letting them loom over me. The trick was letting them feel taller. The higher a man thinks he's standing, the harder the fall. Brian pulled the contract back out his folder, slapped it on the table like a royal flush. We'll have the notary here Friday morning. Just initials, signatures, done. You'll be in your new place before the weekend. Smooth as butter. I looked at him a long time, long enough to let the silence make him squirm. Then I said, You always did like quick games. Never learned chess. His jaw ticked. Amber glanced at him, confused, then looked back at me with a smile of someone who thinks they're watching a man unravel. You'll thank us, she said. I nodded. Maybe. That was enough for them. They left smug, convinced the old man had finally broken. When their car pulled away, I opened my desk drawer. The trust documents rested there like a loaded weapon, invisible but lethal. Jeffrey's words came back. The louder he laughs, the harder the fall. I poured myself a glass of Kimberly's favorite bourbon. She only sipped once a year, Christmas Eve, but the bottle had lasted. I raised it to the empty room. To the show, I said, may it be worth the ticket. The heater clicked on, steady as a drumbeat. Outside, the wind carried the smell of burning leaves. Autumn was settling in, slow and relentless. And on Friday, when Brian brought his notary, he'd find out the stage had already been set, and he was a fool in the spotlight. Friday came cold, the kind of cold that gnaws the bones. I woke before dawn, made coffee the way Kimberly liked it. Strong black, with the ground still clinging to the rim of the cup. Habit, ritual, a way of saying, I remember. By 8, the boxes were stacked higher, labeled in thick black marker. Kitchen, bedroom, garage. Most of them were filled with rags and junk mail, but from the doorway they looked convincing. I left one half open, a framed photo of Brian at 16 sitting on top. Football jersey, crooked grin, mud on his face. Kimberly had loved that picture. I wanted him to see it now, see what he was selling out from under. At 9 sharp, tires crunch on the gravel drive, a sedan with tinted windows, cleaner than anything Brian could afford. Out stepped a woman in a blazer, clipboard in hand, the notary. Behind her, Brian and Amber. He was all grins, Amber in heels that stabbed the driveway like accusations. Dad, Brian said, voice oily with false warmth, we're ready to wrap this up. I stood at the kitchen table, the unsigned contract spread out. The notary sat efficient, pulling pens and forms like a dealer laying down cards. All we need, Brian said, is your John Hancock right here, quick and painless. I didn't move. Instead, I slid the paper slowly back toward him. Before I signed, there's something you should know. He frowned, impatience already flaring. What now? I tapped the table with one finger. Steady. This house isn't yours to sell. Not anymore. Amber laughed, sharp. What are you talking about? It's in his name. We checked. I reached into the desk drawer and laid the fresh documents down, Jeffrey's trust, thick and sealed with authority. The notary glanced at them, brow furrowed. Brian's smirk faltered. What is this? This, I said, voice calm, is a charitable trust. Filed, signed, and legal as of 2 days ago. This house belongs to it now, which means you have no claim, no leverage, no sale. Silence cracked the room wide open. The notary blinked, shifting uncomfortably. Amber's lips parted, but no words came out. Brian grabbed the folder, flipped it open, scanned. His face drained and flushed red. You, he started, choking on the word. I leaned back, arms crossed. You thought you were playing me. But Kimberly planned for this. She left me the tools. I just sharpened them. Amber hissed. Is this even real? The notary cleared her throat. It's very real. And binding. She gathered her pens, stood quickly. Looks like my work here is finished. And she left. Brian stood frozen, fists clenched, face purple. The first public crack. Not a courtroom, not a crowd, but here in his own mind, he'd been humiliated. His grand unveiling turned to ashes. I picked up the photo of him at 16, slid it back into the box, and closed the lid with a snap. Pack your memories, son, I said softly, because this house isn't yours. It never was. Brian opened his mouth, but nothing came. For the first time, he looked small. Amber stormed out, muttering about wasted time. Her heels clicked down the drive, each step an accusation aimed squarely at him. Brian stayed a beat longer, trembling with rage he couldn't unload. Then he shoved past me, shoulder hard, and slammed the door behind him. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was victory, raw and quiet. I sat at the table, sipped cold coffee, and whispered to the letter in my pocket. We've started, Kimberly. The first cut's been made. But I knew this was only the beginning, because men like Brian don't retreat. They scramble, claw, and drag others down with them. And I was ready for every move he thought he had left. Brian didn't come back that weekend. The silence was almost suspicious. I spent the days stacking real boxes this time. Clothes, cookware, photo albums I wasn't leaving behind. Kimberly's letter stayed close, worn softer with every reread. By Sunday night, I sat on the porch, bourbon in hand, watching kids play touch football on the street. Their laughter reminded me of Brian at 12, back when all he wanted was a spiral pass and my approval, back before greed replaced innocence. Monday morning, Jeffrey called. His voice was calm, almost amused. Douglas, your son's lawyer left me a message. Seems Brian tried to contest the trust. And I asked, and he didn't get far. The filing's airtight. He'd need proof of fraud, coercion, or incompetence, which, frankly, is laughable. You sign with full authority. I chuckled. Brian's always believed I was incompetent. Maybe that'll make this sting worse. Exactly, Jeffrey said. But brace yourself. When men like him can't win legally, they go personal. Personal. The word stuck. By Tuesday, the storm hit. Brian showed up in broad daylight, shouting from the driveway so the whole block could hear. A performance. He pointed at the house like it was a stolen car. This is elder abuse, he bellowed. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Mrs. Gallagher across the street came out with her tiny dog, pretending to walk it, ears tilted like satellite dishes. Brian, I said, stepping onto the porch, voice steady. You need to leave. He laughed cruel. Look at him. Old man hiding behind paperwork. Everyone should know my father's lost it. Doesn't even know what he's signing anymore. My mother would be ashamed. The crowd of neighbors thickened. A few whispered. Some shook their heads. Brian wanted a stage. I let him have it. You think humiliation will get you this house? I asked, low enough only he could hear. It'll get me sympathy, he spat. And sympathy gets leverage. I let the silence hang, then raised my voice just enough. My wife trusted me to protect her legacy. That's what I signed. That's what stands. The rest you're shouting, your show, is just noise. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Mrs. Gallagher clutched her dog tighter, whispering to her husband. Brian's face reddened. His theater had turned against him. Go home, son, I said finally. You're done here. He stood frozen, trembling, before stomping back to his car. Tires screeched as he peeled away, leaving whispers in his wake. Back inside, I sank into Kimberly's chair. My hands shook, not with fear, but with adrenaline. That had been the first public humiliation, right there on my own front lawn. Neighbors would talk. Stories would spread. And every retelling would make Brian smaller. The phone rang an hour later. Amber, her voice sharp, brittle. You couldn't keep it quiet, could you? Now everyone knows. You embarrassed him. He embarrassed himself, I said. She cursed under her breath, then hung up. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Jeffrey was right. Brian had gone personal. And I knew he wouldn't stop here. The war had just moved to a bigger stage, and I was ready to meet him there. The week after Brian's public tantrum, the neighborhood buzzed like a beehive. Every trip to the mailbox, I caught the eyes of folks pretending not to stare. Some offered nods of quiet support. Others just smirked, waiting for the next episode of the family drama unfolding on their block. That was fine. Attention cuts both ways. Jeffrey called midweek. "Your son's business is bleeding," he said matter-of-factly. Foreclosure notices, unpaid loans, creditors circling like vultures. He over-leveraged everything banking on your house as collateral. Without it, the dam's breaking. I let the words settle. Kimberly's voice seemed to whisper right there. Protect what matters. I wasn't destroying Brian's life. He'd done that himself. I'd just taken away his cushion. The house he thought he could pawn off to cover his sins. Friday evening, the second public humiliation arrived. Uninvited. I was at the diner, the one next to Jeffrey's office. Grease on the air, clatter of dishes, the comfort of anonymity in a corner booth. Then the door swung open, and in came Brian with Amber. Their entrance wasn't quiet. They wanted eyes on them. Amber looked polished, but brittle, like glass about to crack. Brian's smile was stretched thin, the kind you plaster on when you're losing but want the world to think you're winning. They spotted me. Of course they did. Brian strutted over, loud enough for the entire room. "Look at him," he announced, gesturing at me like I was a prop. My father, everyone, sitting here like some small-town king while his family drowns. You should know, he signed away our future. Signed it all to strangers. The diner hushed. Forks paused midair. A waitress froze, coffee pot hovering. I took a sip of my black coffee, set it down slow. "Strangers?" I asked. My voice carried, calm but cutting. "Your mother left that house in trust. Her decision, not strangers, her legacy." Brian sneered. "Legacy? You're clinging to paper while your own son is ruined." I leaned forward, met his eyes. "No, Brian. You ruined yourself. The house wasn't your bailout. It was her sanctuary. And you tried to sell it like a used car." A man at the counter chuckled, shook his head. Amber hissed at Brian to sit down. But he stayed standing, trapped in his own theater. I added, loud enough for every booth to hear, "If you want sympathy, try honesty. Until then, stop begging the world to believe your lies." The room exhaled in unison. A few nods. Someone muttered, "About time." Brian's face darkened crimson. He sputtered, pointed, but the crowd wasn't with him anymore. Amber tugged at his sleeve, whispering furiously, dragging him back toward the door. He stormed out, leaving behind nothing but the bitter smell of his cologne. The waitress refilled my cup without asking. "On the house," she said softly, eyes kind. I nodded, sipped, and let the quiet victory settle. That was public humiliation number 2, delivered not by me alone, but by a roomful of strangers who saw through his act. Back home, I sat by the window, watching the reflection of the lake shimmer under the moon. Kimberly had always said truth works slow, like water shaping stone. Tonight, I felt it working, steady, relentless, and I knew the third humiliation had to cut deeper. Not just his pride, but his standing. His last mask had to come off in full daylight. Brian went quiet after the diner scene, but quiet from him was never peace. It was plotting. I'd learned that years ago, when he was 16, and came home silent after wrecking the neighbor's fence. Silence meant he was looking for someone else to carry the blame. By the end of the month, the storm broke. A letter arrived from the county. Foreclosure notice, addressed to Brian and Amber. Their house, their pride, their asset. Kimberly would have seen it coming. She always said Brian built castles on credit. Now the tide was washing in. I sat on the porch with the letter in hand, the paper trembling only from the wind. A black crow perched on the power line, cawed like a heckler at a bad comedy show. I almost laughed with it. The third public humiliation didn't come in my kitchen or a diner. It came in a courthouse lobby, marble floors shining under fluorescent lights. I'd gone there with Jeffrey to finalize filings for the trust, another layer of armor. As we were leaving, we spotted Brian across the hall, standing in front of the clerk's window, voice raised. Too raised. "I need an extension," he barked. "You don't understand, I've got assets tied up." The clerk, a woman with tired eyes, shook her head. "Sir, your case is already filed. Foreclosure is proceeding." People stopped. Lawyers in suits, a bailiff, even a janitor with his mop. They all turned. Brian's voice cracked louder, desperation peeling away his polish. "You can't do this. My father, he's sabotaging me. He stole my house, my inheritance." That was my cue. I stepped forward, Jeffrey beside me, and the crowd parted just enough. Brian saw me, face twisting, red and raw. "You," he spat. "You ruined everything." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You ruined it when you bet on greed instead of work. The house was never yours to gamble with. It belonged to Kimberly. And now it belongs to something greater than your debts." Gasps rippled. The bailiff straightened, ready if fists flew. But none did. Brian froze, humiliated in the worst way. Stripped of excuses, cornered in front of strangers who would remember the scene long after. The clerk cleared her throat. "Sir, if you're done, please step aside. Others are waiting." Brian's hands shook, but he couldn't move. Amber appeared, sunglasses hiding her eyes, tugging his arm. "Brian, stop," she whispered, voice breaking. "Just stop." He yanked free, but the fight had drained out of him. He turned away, shoulders hunched, the swagger gone. The janitor muttered, pathetic, under his breath. The words clung like tar. That was humiliation number 3. Public, undeniable, final. Outside, Jeffrey and I walked down the courthouse steps. The air was crisp, the kind that bites and clears the lungs. "You've broken him," Jeffrey said. I shook my head. "No, I've exposed him. There's a difference." That night, back at the house, I lit the fireplace Kimberly loved. The flames crackled, throwing shadows across the photos on the mantel. I raised a glass of bourbon to her picture. "He's falling, Kim," I said softly. "Not because I pushed him, but because you gave me the rope he chose to hang himself with." The fire popped, sparks flying upward, like an answer. But I knew Brian wasn't done reaching for me. Men like him, when stripped bare, often make one last desperate grab. And I was ready to meet it head on. Winter crept in early that year. The lake froze at the edges, a silver crust that caught the weak sun like broken glass. I'd started moving boxes to the smaller villa Kimberly had left me, her secret gift. Each trip across town felt like peeling away another layer of the old life, leaving behind the rot and carrying forward only what mattered. One evening, as I loaded the truck, headlights swept my driveway. Brian's car, alone this time. He stepped out slower than usual, no swagger, just exhaustion wrapped in anger. His coat was too thin for the cold, his face hollowed. "Dad," he said. His voice cracked around the word, like it hurt to use it. I didn't answer, just kept lifting the box into the truck bed. He walked closer, hands shoved in his pockets. "Amber's gone." The box thudded down. I turned. "Gone where?" "Left. Took what was hers, what little was left. Said she didn't marry me to be broke, and laughed it in diners." His eyes flickered with something like shame, but it didn't stay long. He squared his jaw again. "This is on you. You humiliated me." I shook my head. "No, Brian. You humiliated yourself. I just stopped covering it up." His breath fogged between us, ragged. "You think you've won. Sitting here in your trust, your little legal games. You think Mom would have wanted this." I stepped closer, steady. "She wanted me to protect her legacy, not to bankroll your failures. She knew you, Brian. That's why she hid it." That hit him like a strike to the ribs. He staggered back half a step, then rallied with a sneer. "Fine. You've got your house, your money, but I'll rebuild. And when I do, you'll regret cutting me out." I almost laughed. "You think this is about money?" I'd give it all away tomorrow just to have Kimberly back. But your greed made you blind. You lost everything before I ever lifted a finger. For a moment, silence. The winter wind whistled through the bare trees. Then he snapped. You're nothing without me. You're just an old man playing chess with ghosts. I climbed into the truck, engine rumbling to life. Then let the ghosts be my company. They've been more faithful than you. His face twisted, but he didn't move. I pulled out, left him standing in the cold driveway, his shadow long under the streetlight. That night at the villa, I unpacked the first box in the new living room. Kimberly's stone rabbit from the garden came out wrapped in towels. I set it by the window, looking out at the frozen lake. It leaned a little, the same as before, but here it meant something different. Not decay, continuity. I sat down, breathing in the silence. The villa was smaller, humbler, but it felt alive. Kimberly's hand was everywhere. The curtains she'd picked, the faint smell of cedar in the closets. The phone rang. The old landline. Carried over. I answered. It was Brian. His voice was ragged. Hello, Dad. I don't know where to go. I closed my eyes. Kimberly's words burned in my pocket again. Protect what matters. But what mattered now wasn't saving him. It was letting him learn. Then start by standing on your own 2 feet, I said, and hung up. The dial tone hummed in the empty room. The lake groaned outside, ice shifting under the night sky. Brian was at his breaking point, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to let him break. Snow fell heavy that week, blanketing the villa in silence. The world looked clean, untouched, like Kimberly's hand had brushed fresh paint across the land. I shoveled the walk slow, steady, each scrape of the metal blade echoing into the empty woods. My body ached, but it was a good ache, the kind that reminds you you're still here, still capable. Inside, the fire hummed in the hearth. The stone rabbit sat by the window, watching the lake disappear under white. I poured coffee and sat with Kimberly's letter again. The paper was soft now, edges curled, ink smudged in spots where I'd read it too often. Protect what matters. She hadn't meant money. She'd meant me. The phone rang again that afternoon. Brian. I nearly let it go, but habit won. His voice was thinner than before, frayed. Dad, the bank took the house today. Everything's gone. I waited. Silence is a weapon. He pushed on, desperate. I need a place. Just for a while. Until I get back on my feet. I stared at the fire, the log collapsing inward, sparks rising. You had a place. You had everything. You sold it all for debt and pride. You're my father. His voice cracked into a shout. Family helps family. The old me might have caved at that, might have opened the door, set up the spare bed, and let him rot the walls from the inside again. But Kimberly's whisper was louder. Don't let him take your dignity. Family doesn't bleed family dry, I said. My voice was calm, final. You made your choice. He cursed, a long string of words meant a wound. I let them pass like wind through broken shutters. Then the line went dead. That night, Jeffrey called. I heard Brian's business partners are suing. Fraud, unpaid debts, misrepresentation. It'll get ugly. I nodded though he couldn't see me. It already has. You should be careful, Jeffrey added. Men corner like that, they can lash out. I looked out the window. Snow kept falling, erasing footprints, hiding the scars of the land. Let him try. I'm not the one cornered. Days later, word spread. A neighbor from the old street called, voice full of gossip. Brian's out. House gone. Wife gone. Business collapsed. Folks are saying he's ruined. I thanked her, hung up, and stood at the window. The rabbit leaned in his familiar way. But here it wasn't a symbol of neglect. It was survival. Kimberly had placed it once in rich soil, and now it watched over me in this new ground. That evening, I lit a single candle on the mantel. Kimberly used to do that every winter, said it was a way of keeping warmth on the walls. I watched the flame flicker, shadows dancing like memories. The phone stayed silent. No Brian, no Amber, just the crackle of fire, the hum of wind across the lake. But deep down I knew, silence from Brian didn't mean surrender. It meant he was gathering whatever scraps of pride he had left for one final strike. And when he did, I'd be ready to answer, not with anger, but with the truth he'd spent his life running from. The silence broke on a Sunday afternoon. Church bells drifted across the frozen lake, muffled by snow. I sat with a book Kimberly once loved. Steinbeck, Worn Spine, her notes in the margins. Peace lived in those quiet moments. But peace never lasts when a man like Brian refuses to let go. The knock rattled the villa door. Hard, impatient. I set the book down, stood, and opened it. There he was. My son, or what was left of him. Coat wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, stubble on his cheeks. The arrogance was gone, replaced by desperation, raw and sour. "Dad," he said, breath clouding in the cold. "Please, I don't have anywhere else." I leaned against the frame, blocking the warmth behind me. "You had everywhere, Brian. You gambled it away." He swallowed hard. "I made mistakes." "Fine, but you can't just leave me out here. I'm your son." "You're my son," I said quietly. "But you're also the man who tried to sell the roof over my head a week after we buried your mother." He flinched, eyes darting. I thought I was helping. "No," I cut him off. "You thought you were cashing in. There's a difference." He looked past me into the villa, at the boxes half unpacked, the fire flickering. "This is hers, isn't it? Mom's secret house." I didn't answer. Silence was sharper than agreement. His jaw tightened. "She always trusted you more. Always gave you everything. What about me?" "She gave you chances." I said, "More than you earned. That was her gift. And you burned everyone." The wind howled through the pines, carrying our words back at us. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm ruined, Dad. The bank, the lawsuits. Amber's gone. I've got nothing left. Just let me stay. Just a bed. Just until—" "Until what?" I asked. "Until you rebuild another lie? Until you find another angle?" "No, Brian. This isn't about shelter. It's about consequence." His face twisted, anger flaring again. "You think you're noble? Sitting here with your trust fund and your secret letter? You think Mom will be proud of this?" I straightened, meeting his eyes. "I know she would, because I'm finally doing what she asked, protecting what matters. And that means protecting myself from you." For a long moment, he just stood there, breathing hard. Then he spat in the snow, turned, and stalked down the path. His footprints cut deep into the white, jagged and uneven. I watched until the trees swallowed him. Inside, the fire crackled. I picked up Kimberly's book, but my eyes couldn't find the words. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of holding the line. Later, as dusk fell, the phone rang. Jeffrey again. "Douglas," he said, voice tight. "Brian's digging. He's asking questions about the trust, about the villa. He's desperate." "I know," I said. "Be ready," Jeffrey warned. "A man with nothing to lose can be dangerous." I hung up, staring at the stone rabbit by the window. Its tilt hadn't changed, but in the candlelight it looked like it was leaning toward me, urging vigilance. Kimberly had given me the tools. I had used them well, but the final test was still ahead, and I could feel it coming, heavy as the snow on the roof, waiting for the right moment to collapse. The storm hit on a Thursday night. Snow whipped across the lake, rattling the shutters of the villa like fists on a coffin lid. I sat by the fire, bourbon in hand, staring at the stone rabbit on the sill. Kimberly's presence was thick in that room. Her books on the shelves, her blanket draped over the chair. She'd given me the strength to fight, but the fight wasn't over. The phone rang. Not the landline this time. My cell. I picked it up, saw the name. Brian. I almost let it go. Almost. But I answered. His voice was ragged, hoarse. "Dad, I'm at the lake road. Car's dead. I need help." The storm howled outside, throwing snow against the glass. I hesitated. Was it real, or just another ploy? "Please," he said. His voice cracked in a way that carried truth. Desperation has a sound you can't fake. I grabbed my coat, pulled on boots, and stepped into the storm. The wind slapped my face raw. The snow stung my eyes. Each breath burned my lungs. But I pushed on, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Half a mile down, I found him. His car sat half buried in drifts. Hup, hazard lights dead. Brian stood hunched, arms wrapped around himself, shivering. He looked less like a predator now and more like a lost boy who'd wandered too far. "You came," he said, teeth chattering. I nodded, pulled the spare blanket from under my arm, draped it over him. His eyes flicked to mine, wide with something I hadn't seen in years. Not arrogance, not anger, just fear. Together we pushed the car until it was pointless, snow swallowing every effort. Finally, I motioned toward the villa. "Come on." We trudged back, the storm biting at us, the world reduced to white and shadow. By the time we reached the door, we were both shaking. Inside, the fire welcomed us, crackling with warmth. Brian collapsed into a chair, clutching the blanket. "I can't do it anymore," he muttered. "Everything's gone. The house, the business, Amber. Everyone laughs at me now. I'm nothing." I watched him, the man who had tried to strip me bare, now stripped himself. His hands trembled, not just from cold, but from collapse. "You're not nothing," I said quietly, "but you've been living like it, chasing paper, running from responsibility. You made yourself empty." He looked up, eyes red. "So what now? You leave me out in the cold." I shook my head. "No, I let you sit in the warmth long enough to feel what you've lost. That's the difference." The firelight carved lines into his face, made him look older than me. He opened his mouth to argue, but the words died. Silence filled the room, broken only by the storm outside. I poured him a cup of coffee, set it on the table. He wrapped his hands around it like it was life itself. And as he sipped, eyes closed, I realized this was a prelude, the quiet before the final reckoning. Because tomorrow, when the storm cleared, Bri would have to step back into the world. And that world would not forgive him. But I would be there to watch, and to make sure he didn't drag me, or Kimberly's memory, down with him. Morning broke sharp and blue after the storm. The lake was sealed in ice, smooth as glass. The world scrubbed clean under a sheet of white. Inside the villa, the fire had burned down to embers. I stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching Brian stir on the couch. He looked younger in sleep, fragile even, like the boy Kimberly once cradled after nightmares. But the years had carved him into something else, something selfish, hungry, reckless. And that didn't vanish with one storm. He woke with a groan, sat up, rubbed his face. Thanks for last night." The words sounded foreign in his mouth. He glanced around the room, eyes landing on Kimberly's stone rabbit by the window. "She kept that?" I nodded. "Always." Silence stretched. He sipped the coffee I set out, his hands shaking. Then finally he spoke. "They're going to come after me hard, Dad. The bank, the partners, the lawyers. I don't have anything left." I leaned against the mantel, Kimberly's blanket draped across my shoulders. "You had everything, and you traded it for debt and ego. Now you've got the lesson. It's the only thing that sticks when all else is gone." His jaw clenched. "So what, you just watch me sink? I watch you face the consequences you built." He slammed the mug down, coffee sloshing. "You don't get it. You got Mom's letter, her money, her secret house. You're safe. I'm drowning." I stepped closer, my voice like steel. "You try to drag me under with you. Try to sell this roof before the dirt settled on your mother's grave. You don't get to play the victim now." His face twisted, half fury, half shame. "Maybe I hated you," he whispered, "for always being the one she trusted, for being the man she leaned on instead of me." I let the words hang. They cut, but truth always cuts. She leaned on me because I carried her, Brian, not because I took from her. He stood, pacing, restless. "So what now? You let me walk out into nothing? Freeze in the streets?" I looked him dead in the eye. "You walk out with the truth. That's more than you've carried in years." The air thickened, heavy with unspoken things. He looked like he wanted to strike me or fall into my arms. But he didn't either. He just stared, chest heaving, until the silence crushed him. Finally, he grabbed his coat. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "One day, you'll regret cutting me off." I didn't move. "I regret plenty, but not this." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the rabbit rattled on the sill. Outside, his figure cut through the snow, small against the wide frozen lake. I sank into Kimberly's chair, heart pounding. The final act was close. I could feel it in my bones. Brian wasn't finished. He would lash out one last time, and when he did, I'd be waiting, with her words in my pocket, with the truth at my back, and with the quiet strength of a man who'd already survived the worst. 2 weeks passed. The villa settled into its rhythm. Quiet mornings with coffee, evenings by the fire. The lake held its frozen breath. The world hushed under winter's weight. But peace never lasts with a man like Brian on the loose. Jeffrey called one morning, his voice grim. "Douglas, it's official. The foreclosure went through. His house is gone. Auctioned off yesterday. His name's blacklisted by half the lenders in town. And the lawsuits? They're piling high." I closed my eyes, breathed slow. "So he's cornered." "Exactly," Jeffrey said. "And cornered men make reckless moves." He was right. That night, I heard the crunch of tires on the frozen driveway. I didn't need to look. I knew. Brian. The knock came harder this time. Furious. I opened the door. He stood there, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight, the cold whipping his coat. But behind the rage was something else. Panic. "You ruined me," he shouted, loud enough for the pines to carry it back in echoes. "You and that damn trust. You've taken everything from me." "No, Brian," I said evenly. "You took it from yourself. I just stopped you from taking me with you." His hands shook as he pulled a folded sheet from his pocket and thrust it toward me. Court summons. Fraud. Mismanagement. His business partners were tearing him apart. "Look at this," he spat. "They're blaming me for everything. You could help. One word from you, one check from that account Mom left, and I'd be free." I shook my head. Kimberly left that for dignity, not for bailing out a liar. His face contorted. She loved me, too. "Yes," I said quietly, "but love doesn't erase truth. And the truth is, she saw what you were becoming. That's why she hid it." He staggered, like the words struck harder than a fist. Then he snarled. "You think this makes you strong? Makes you righteous? You're just an old man clinging to paper while your blood drowns." I stepped forward, close enough to see the crack in his armor. "I'm an old man who kept his word. To your mother. To myself. That's strength, Brian. Something you never learned." The door was still open, the winter air biting us both. His voice rose to a howl. "I'll drag you down with me. If I go under, you're coming too." I didn't flinch. "Then you better swim hard, son, because I've already let go of you." For a heartbeat, silence, just the wind, the creak of trees heavy with snow. Then he turned, stormed back to his car, and peeled away into the night. I stood at the threshold, the cold stinging my face. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of finality. The next time he came, I knew it would be the last. Inside, I lit the fire again. The rabbit leaned in its old way, shadows flickering over its crooked ears. Kimberly's letter pressed against my chest. The words burned into me now. Protect what matters. The storm wasn't over, but the end was close. And I was ready for it. Ready for the final strike, the last reckoning, the moment this long, bitter game would close for good. The end came on a night thick with silence, the kind that presses on your ears until even your heartbeat sounds like a drum. The lake outside was black glass, moonlight carving a silver path across its frozen skin. I sat in Kimberly's chair, her letter in my hand, the fire burning low. I knew he would come. Men like Brian can't leave the stage without one last bow. The knock came just after midnight. Hard, frantic. I rose, slow, the way a man does when he's already decided how the story ends. When I opened the door, there he was, my son, what was left of him, his coat unbuttoned, hair wild, eyes blazed with the madness of a man who'd lost everything but his rage. "You!" he shouted, breath smoking in the cold. You stood by while I burned. You let them laugh at me, let them strip me bare. I didn't answer. I only stepped aside, motioned him in. He stomped past me, fist clenched, and stood before the fire like he owned the room. His shadow loomed on the walls, tall but hollow. "Look at you," he spat, "sitting here in comfort while I'm ruined. You think this is justice? You think Mom would have wanted this?" I walked to the mantel, placed Kimberly's letter there like an offering. She wanted dignity. She wanted her legacy safe. I gave her that. You try to sell for scraps. His laugh was harsh, broken. "Legacy? You're hiding behind paper while your son begs. That's no legacy, that's betrayal." I turned, met his eyes. "No, Brian. Betrayal is what you did when you tried to sell your mother's home before the earth on her grave was cold. Betrayal is what you did when you treated family like collateral." His face twisted. He lunged a step closer, fist trembling. For a moment, I thought he might strike. But then the fire popped, sparks snapping into the air, and he froze. "You've humiliated me," he whispered. "In front of neighbors, in diners, in courtrooms. You've made me a joke." I shook my head. "No, you did that to yourself. I only stopped protecting you from the truth." The words hung heavy. He staggered back, like the weight finally landed. His eyes darted to the stone rabbit on the windowsill, tilted the same as it had in Kimberly's garden. "She loved that stupid thing," he muttered. "She did," I said, "because it endured. Even crooked, it endured. That's what she wanted for me. For us. Endurance." Something in him broke then. The fury drained, replaced by a hollow emptiness. He slumped into the chair opposite mine, head in his hands. For the first time since he was a boy, he wept quiet, jagged sobs that sounded more like surrender than grief. I let him cry. I didn't move, didn't comfort. That was Kimberly's lesson, too. Sometimes the only way a man learns is when no one saves him. When the fire burned low, he rose without a word. He walked to the door, shoulders sagging, and stepped into the night. His footprints cut across the snow, the same jagged trail as before. He didn't look back. I closed the door, locked it, and stood in the silence. Kimberly's letter lay on the mantel, her words etched deeper into me than ever. Protect what matters. I'd done it. The house, the trust, the villa by the lake, they weren't trophies. They were symbols, proof that dignity outlasts deceit. I poured the last of the bourbon into a glass, raised it to the empty room. "We did it, Kim. He can't touch us anymore." Outside, the ice on the lake groaned, splitting faintly in the distance, a sound like finality, like release. And as I sat back in her chair, the stone rabbit watching from the window, I felt it at last, the peace she'd promised. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was final. And it was mine. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.